This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Squarespace, the easiest way to make a beautiful website, portfolio, store, or blog that looks great on any browser, on any platform. If you go to squarespace.com and use the promo code THUMBS at checkout, you will get 10% off your order. Squarespace.com, the promo code THUMBS.
Hooray! What is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's October 28th, I forgot the year. Professional tight cast.
Welcome to the Professional Tightcast.
Hear that sound, everyone. You know what it's time for.
Professional Tightcast.
Ugh.
This is Idle Thumbs 234. I'm Chris Remo.
I'm James Spafford.
I'm Jake Rodkin.
I'm Nick Breckon.
Hey!
Oh, hey.
Hey, if I say hey really excitedly, maybe it'll get Nick riled up.
You'll
Welcome back, Nick.
You'll jazz him up.
I'm feeling pretty jazzed.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Jazzed.
You played a game with blues music.
I did. Well, I don't know if I call that blues
jazzed,
music.
Rebel Galaxy.
Yes.
And
From Eric Schaefer and Travis Baldry, who are former...
I did not know that.
Oh.
I had
now
no
you
idea.
know.
Oh. I didn't. You just mentioned this game, and I'm like, all right, I'll play this game.
Yeah, no, this is from ex-Runic / ex-Blizzard North developers, Eric Schaefer and Travis Baldry.
So Eric Schaefer was one of the old
Idle Thumbs guests.
That's true. Well, that's not what I was talking about.
Yes! He was somewhere between episode 49 and episode 50. We had a special episode that interviewed him.
Yeah.
One of the old
But he also goes
friends of the show.
But he also goes way back to Diablo 1.
Yeah.
And then Travis Baldry...
Where he got his start, though. Let's,
Yeah, right. Where he took off.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Travis Baldry worked at Runic on Torchlight,
Yes.
but before that made his own game called Fate.
Oh, right. That's right. He did join
he
Runic.
wasn't Blizzard.
Well,
right?
I think, did he join around, what, Hellscape, Hellgate London. There it is.
That thing.
Yeah.
Well, they basically acquired him because he was making that game, and then they started making their own.
That's right. They were making it. What you said? You said it. Fate.
Yeah.
Right.
Or Fate was his, I think, and then they were making another one, like Mythic or something.
It was a very strange period in their history. Anyway.
These are two guys who worked on Diablo and Diablo-style games for many, many years, and I had no idea that they made this game called Rebel Galaxy. Mm-hmm. But now that you've said that, it makes a ridiculous amount of sense, because I have never played a game like this before, not because any of the component parts are unusual. It is basically a game made up of a ton of very familiar component parts combined in a very unusual way.
Yeah.
So this is essentially a space exploration game that plays kind of like a Diablo, or that is structured like a Diablo-style RPG. But in the moment-to-moment gameplay, you're basically piloting a ship around on a 2D plane, strangely enough.
Yeah.
Like you're flying through space, but you don't have full 6 degrees of freedom. In contrast to like Sublevel 0, which we talked about recently, you are basically just essentially traversing an enormous 2D world map that is, rendered like in
Weird that it's
3D.
2D.
Yeah, it's because the point of it is just the combat is like World War II broad.
You know what this game is? I realized. I think the closest point of contact to me is Sid Meier's Pirates.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's actually pretty close.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In a lot of different ways. And in this way in particular, though, in the combat, in the sense that it is, it's like broadside based. So you're constantly sort of angling.
Strafing.
Yeah, you're strafing and angling for sort of a vector that would give you an advantage over the other ship.
Yeah.
And then there are sort of different, weapon types that you can fire at any particular time. But yeah, no, it does. It is true that outside of that, it feels like a very strange sort of mishmash of things that feel very familiar, like Freelancer is another big touchstone. I feel, but also it doesn't really feel like Freelancer at all. Freelancer was very much just like an actual like space sim with like a light RPG kind of coding, This feels like a sort of, a fairly unique take on all of that stuff. It feels like it has its own flavor.
Yeah.
And cowboy rock.
Yeah, cowboy. And the reason I said blues is because the first music you hear when you first go into it actually is like Robert Johnson style, straight blues music, just a guitar. And I was like, wow, this is an interesting choice. Like, I assumed this was going to be sort of Firefly style.
That's what I thought too. Rock. And then suddenly the lyrics launch in, and you're just like, what is like? It's really odd.
It's nothing about. It's so funny. This is a very odd experience playing a game that I wasn't aware of. Because usually when I'm recommended a game just out of nothing, just out of nowhere, like I didn't know anything about this and I played it, at least in recent years, my experience has been either, oh, okay, I see what kind of thing this is. Like it's, like this, but it's like X, but Y, or it's basically exactly like X, or it's, pretty much half X, half Y, or whatever. Or it's like, whoa, this is like just completely crazy. And I had no idea what I was getting into. And Downwell is an example of that. Yeah. It's like I had no clue what that was going to be. And it was just a really, interesting, cool thing that is really unusual. This game is strange because it is just a bunch of different components of familiar games. Not just like 2 or 3, but just a bunch of totally different things arranged in a way that is really strange. Like I got into it and I thought I was just... didn't know the controls because I couldn't figure out how to angle my ship in 360 to, like full 6 degrees. And I'm like, what am I?
Well, you start making assumptions. Like
exactly.
The second I got in, I was like, oh, okay, so this is just like an arcadey thing. And then I realized very quickly, like, oh no, there's this, a space station that I can like dock at and do all these sort of like higher fidelity things. But then that sort of implies like a much larger game that doesn't really exist. I mean, it is still a very straightforward, get a mission, go out, shoot some stuff, and
that's like a wing commander type structure?
It's like Elite more than that. I think there is sort of like a economy simulation going on where different areas of the world map have different demands, and there are, there's a whole list of commodities that can be traded, and et cetera, et cetera.
But it does have that thing where you just go into a space station and you go to the mission board and you basically vacuum up all the available missions. And
which is like Diablo, right?
Yeah, which is like Diablo. And then you go out on your world map and you see in the little thumbnail map in the corner, all your little...
They're just pinged as
pings
points,
are just all out there across the galaxy. And they're like, oh, okay, well, one of them is your primary goal and you can set whichever one you want to be your primary. And the other ones are just there. And then on your way to them, you can go into sort of warp speed, faster than light travel to really speed through the galaxy. But instead of that just zipping you there in a second, it just means you actually go really fast through the physical space itself, which means you can be interrupted by like hazards in the way or enemies who open fire at you while you're zooming by, and the game will just wrench you out of light speed, and then you're back into the game. So it has elements of that's kind of Diablo or MMO style RPG, and it has elements of like a space exploration game, and it has just this kind of unusual broadside naval style combat. And then all of the fiction and the way everything looks and feels and sounds, to me, basically, when you pointed out the Blizzard connection, this was funny. Yeah, because this is like, if someone played StarCraft 2, but only played the cutscenes and didn't play any of the real-time strategy part, they just played the parts where you're like going to sort of space dive bars and kind of just like big beefy men stomping around with each other and like chomping cigars like that. If you're just like, oh, what game would contain this? And you'd never heard of real-time strategy games because that stuff has nothing to do with actually what is going on in StarCraft, the video game part. This is what you would basically make, maybe.
Why is it the big beefy men thing specific? Like that to me is like the aspect of it.
What body type would fit inside Space Marine armor? That's got to be all that it is, right? Like,
I guess.
If you look at the Warhammer 40k Space Marine guy and then just stripped him down to his like heart-shaped boxers,
it's like a little
to his MeUndies,
right?
I mean, in the case of Blizzard, you definitely draw a line to Warhammer and Warhammer 40k, and that stuff is like that even when there isn't space.
So. But this seems like it's now just like that's the aesthetic that we're living in.
This game is it's a few degrees off from that because there are a lot more sort of crazy alien shapes in this game than there are in StarCraft. So like in this game, you go into the first guy you meet who gives you your initial mission is kind of this like crazy sort of half Cthulhu, half just like cartoon man with big teeth alien who actually like it's really well rendered and well animated and like he speaks a sort of just a sort of an alien language that is well acted. Like all that stuff is actually really well put together as it is in the StarCraft 2 cutscenes. Does
liquid in like whiskey tumblers swirl around as nicely as it does in StarCraft 2?
All the bars have a bartender wearing like a suit vest and nice.
Could be enamored by that guy.
As they should.
Yeah. Different guys, but they all wear that uniform, which is funny. Nick, actually, I have a question for you. You've probably played more of it than I have.
Yeah.
Is the game, other than having aliens in it, is the game any more diverse than just beefy dudes? Because it feels like it should be, more so at least than StarCraft 2 is, but I don't know yet if that's the case.
I honestly haven't paid enough attention to really the narrative layer to actually even say. I have to be honest, it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Mankind was wiped out except for the beefy dudes who were out in space being men. So this is... I have no real point of reference to this game because I haven't played it. So what I'm going to say is potentially just complete nonsense. But when you were describing it as a collection of familiar things, but maybe in a way that you weren't exactly expecting, the company that seems to be described as that very consistently is Supergiant Games. I imagine the feeling is very different, even though that descriptor probably matches.
Yeah, it is very different because in a Supergiant game, at least in the 2 Supergiant games that have been released so far,
which is Bastion and Transistor, sorry, for people who don't know the developer.
Sorry, yes. The basic thing you do in that game is like you have a character who just kind of runs around hitting things. And especially in Transistor, the combat is a lot more complex than that. And Transistor maybe gets a little bit more into what you're talking about, but Bastion especially is like completely intuitive just from sort of square one.
Yeah, that's true.
This game, like that game is like you're an avatar in a world. You are literally represented. You're on a plane, like a flat plane. You run along it. You hit A to swing your hammer. And like, you know what I mean? It's not.
That's true. The surprise to me in Supergiant Games tends to come, at least in the first couple hours, from how much sort of stuff there is inside of their game outside of just clicking on guys, and sort of how leveling and upgrading and like a base in Bastion sort of start unfurling as you play the game, when what you think it's going to be is just a
straightforward
click on guy game.
The surprise and the sort of depth in a Supergiant game comes from kind of continued slow embellishment of very straightforward familiar systems in a way that like ends up creating this kind of big scaffold that you understand.
Supergiant ends up being Baroque as fuck.
Right, exactly. But very approachably, because none of the things
approachably Baroque, Chris.
Because none of the things they add on are like weird or obtuse. Whereas in Rebel Galaxy, at least to me, and this might not be if you'd been following the game, this probably wouldn't happen to you. But just going into Rebel Galaxy without any grounding, it's not so much that I got a very like basic framework that was then layered on top of it. Was like this combination of things is totally shocking to me right from the start. Like I said, I literally kept trying to figure out why my ship couldn't go up and down. And like you hit forward on the stick that would normally kind of pitch you down,
right,
and it slows you down instead. And I'm like, I hit every button on the controller, every stick and button on the controller trying to point up, and you just can't. That's not what the game is. But you would never guess that by looking at a screenshot of it. Whereas if you look at a screenshot of Bastion, or if you look at a screenshot of Transistor, especially if it's in the combat sequence, you can basically figure out like, oh, I see what's going on there.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's why I brought up Pirates, because I feel like that game, if you look at a screenshot of that game, you would fully understand this is a top-down perspective.
Yeah.
This is all about,
Well, it's also on an ocean.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, the combat field is actually drawn.
You know what I mean? Like you're actually, it's there. Yeah. Whereas this is, and the sort of jarring thing about that too is that other ships can go in 3D,
other ships
space.
Like zoom all around you. So your camera can point up and down in any direction.
Strange.
Because you aim. It's kind of like in Doom, how if
an
enemy
totally
is above you and you shoot them, you will just shoot at them, even though you can't actually point your gun upward.
Man, I'm waiting for the reader mail to say, you guys totally can just go up and have your perspective of this game completely ruined.
God, God, my mind would explode more than it has ever exploded before.
Like, did you not try pressing page up and page down?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Number lock.
Yeah, control and up.
These controls cannot be accessed from the inferior console controller input method.
Yeah.
That was what happened to me when the reissue of the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games came out several months ago.
Oh, yeah.
And
Where
I,
you're like-
I downloaded them, and like half of there are just more inputs than fit on a console controller.
Chris,
And
if you had the true controller for that, which is a flight stick that contains 35 buttons
know.
accessible from your thumb, and then 4 more on like an off-pad serial port adjunct dongle, then you'd be,
I've got that.
How many buttons are on your flight stick, Nick? How many pedals do you have plugged in?
I don't have the pedals.
I mean, TIE Fighter is not even anywhere. I mean, TIE Fighter is still basically an arcade game relative to the actual depths of the flight
TIE Fighter
genre. What did I say?
No, I'm just kidding.
Of an actual TIE Fighter? Please.
Yeah.
Please, I've got 70 hours clocked.
And my simulation sphere.
Right.
My TIE Fighter ball that I roll around my living room.
TIE Fighter ball, please, Chris.
What? What's yours?
Whatever.
My scale model Death Star ball.
Yeah.
They're the same ball, but I swap out the decals that I paste on the inside of the cockpit. And I sort of like scrunch down when I'm in the Death Star one, so I
Death
feel
Star one makes an ominous noise when I roll.
Yeah.
It scares my cat more.
It's a giant version of that BB-8 toy.
Oh, that's what's inside that thing.
A small,
It's just a tiny Death Star?
That's the twist in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
It gets violent.
Right.
when that robot just hovers a few inches off the ground, it goes boop, and then just the planet explodes.
Yeah.
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 You know, it's 30 years later. Technology's increased. I mean, like, think about what we can fit in a phone. So when Star Wars came out, took up like a room or a whole building.
Right.
Maybe that robot's a Death Star.
Yeah.
Moore's law.
You can fit a Death Star in such a tiny compartment these days. That's the kind of like, you know how in...
That shitty keynote for that CES was just terrible. It was like...
What?
Oh, just the
in
CES
the world
keynote.
of Star Wars?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we had that Intel CEO showing like spider droids, so I guess, you know. What were you going to say?
Have Steve G apostrophe Obs. Just one more thing.
Steve Goblin.
Stove Gobo. Noted tech entrepreneur. Yeah.
So that's
He just
Rebel
dresses like
Galaxy.
regular Steve Jobs, and he's got boots. Yeah, Rebel Galaxy, is that what we're talking about?
That was, I mean, allegedly, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was until we started talking about Stove Gobo.
True. It's cool. I like that game.
Yeah, no.
It's interesting. It's fun. I mean, it's the kind of game that, because of the mission structure being what it is, you can kind of just play as much as you want of it at any given time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
it just immediately quits out and immediately puts you back into the exact same spot. It's that kind of game.
Yeah,
And it's a fairly predictable experience.
Well, it's sort of like, I don't mean this to be like insulting, but I mean this is the same way I feel about, for instance, Runix games, like the Torchlight games.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of low mental investment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you kind of just want something that looks pretty and that you can just kind of tool around with for any amount of time, this game does that. Like, it's, you know...
That was you with Torchlight 1, wasn't it?
Exactly. That was totally me with Torchlight 1. Yeah. Precisely. And often I'll, like, listen to a podcast while I'm playing games like that, you know, stuff like that.
It's a good game for that.
Cool. Yeah. Rebel Galaxy. It's on Steam right now. It's not early access or anything, is it?
No, it's out. It's out for real.
I mean, it didn't seem like it necessarily was.
It's on console as well, but I'm not sure which.
Okay.
Yeah.
Check your local
Might be both,
listings.
actually.
Cool.
Oh, you mean it might be 2
Yeah, 2 of them.
out of the 3.
I give it a 2 out of 3.
Xbox One and Xbox 360.
Oh, I thought Nick was referring to it being on the PS4 and the Wii U when he said it's on both. Because, I mean, Microsoft really blew E3 like 2 years ago, right? They're pretty much lost the console war then, if you ask me.
Yeah.
If you ask my YouTube comments. Oh, man, Jay Allard. Jay Allard, my good buddy.
Is it Jay News?
Huh?
Is he resurfaced?
Well, no, he's not. He resurfaced years ago and nobody noticed. It turns out that Jay Allard has a Twitter account, and it is just at Jay Allard. I was really hoping that it would be at Jay, but
Just
that's
the letter J.
J.
Yeah.
But that's some lady got that. Some
in 2007.
Yeah, some incredibly
Jay
early
Allard
Twitter
fan.
adopter beat Jay Allard to the punch. He could not predict. He was ahead of the time
I thought he was an early adult.
in many
but
ways,
turns
but he
out-
could not predict the rise of Twitter. But Jay Allard exists, which means that we now have a pseudo public way to directly contact Jay Allard at all times. Even though I don't think that he responds to tweets ever, because like he tweets about every year.
No, he does not. He has tweeted once in the last 5 years.
No, he tweeted once like a year ago, and then before that, it was like 5 years ago. So
What did he say?
it
must have been pretty.
It was not
momentous
important.
It was
occasion.
about his.
It's about bike
company.
safety or whatever Jay Allard's about.
My
But
bike.
Jay Allard.
okay, so it is my hope. This is a rude thing to do to Jay Allard, but it comes from a genuine place. It is my hope that he still has his Twitter notifications set to their default
Here's
settings.
why he probably does. Is because most of those settings were probably added after he last used Twitter.
Yeah.
And every time Twitter adds a new feature that causes
default.
a notification on your phone, it just opts you into it.
Right. So this has made me realize.
Which means fave his tweets, like do all the things that might, like, no, I'm just saying.
You
because
can.
If he turned off, regular just reply notifications probably existed when he last used Twitter.
That's true.
But what might not have existed is retweeting notifications and fave notifications
Right.
and mention notifications.
If you're not catching the picture that we're trying to paint here, this is an opportunity to potentially actually ask Jay Allard to appear on an episode of Idle Thumbs, which will not happen because he's Jay Allard and we're a podcast that is recorded in a room with a painting of Jay Allard on its wall. But in the event that he's maybe interested and we don't know how to get a hold of him in any other way, if one who listens to this podcast were so inclined to send a tweet to @JAllard saying it would be awesome if you would be a guest on the Idle Thumbs podcast, who knows what would happen? Maybe his Zune would melt from the number of notifications it was receiving.
Did they ever release a Twitter client for Zoom?
I don't know if Zunes even have
so.
the internet.
good
His
point.
Microsoft Courier prototype that he still has with him. Or no, was that what it was?
Surface. It was the old Surface.
No, the old Surface
the
was the
Courier.
huge table. The Courier was the
Courier's
two-screened
okay, yeah,
book,
you're right.
book
Yeah.
iPad thing.
You're right.
Fill up both displays of Jay Allard's Courier prototype with emails about how he should be on Idle Thumbs from the Twitter account that he doesn't even remember creating. So,
Man, when this podcast began 8 fucking years ago, however long it was, gross. He was actively tweeting.
I know, we're
we
idiots.
we never tweeted
That
at
was
him.
the time. That was.
I mean,
He was really bummed when Idle Thumbs stopped at episode 50 and he stopped tweeting.
That's true. Those things actually happened right around the same time.
Did you ever check to see if he was a backer? Did you look through?
He was not.
He was not. No, yeah. We would have noticed when that came through.
I mean, he's got to be on other forms of social media, right?
He's on LinkedIn.
He's got to have a LinkedIn.
He's got
Jake is connected to him on LinkedIn.
Oh,
He accepted my connection, but I've been too chicken to email him or send him a LinkedIn message.
Maybe he got confused when he saw your invitation and thought it was him. He thought it was just like one of his other
I am
accounts.
listed as Jay Rodkin on all professional networks and hope that I get to sort of like bite Jay Allard's glow.
Notable J's.
Notable Jays.
A new LinkedIn group.
yeah.
Can you have groups on LinkedIn?
Yeah, there's tons of groups.
Okay. I don't go there.
J. Rock.
I mean, you don't
J.K.
need to.
Rowling,
It's just
JG
me.
JG
It's
Edwards.
just me. it's me.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt,
Yeah,
JGL,
And those guys all hanging out.
and J. Allard, and J. Rodkin.
No one calls me that,
Fighting
but not yet. Anyway, that's just drop him in the middle of the episode in the hopes that maybe someone thinks about telling Jay Allard that his presence would be appreciated and desired on this podcast.
Yeah.
We could take the painting down.
Why?
Just when he's here, if he's
Oh, just when
uncomfortable.
he's here.
Yeah, yeah.
We could elevate
just
it
cover
too.
it.
Man, what if he signed
Just
the painting?
cover it. What's behind there?
Oh,
Nothing.
man.
It's a work in progress.
That would actually be the best. Conspicuously draped painting. So
It's like,
very
what's
well lit.
what's that covered up painting next to the painting of Bobby Kotick? You'll see. We should probably just leave the JL one covered until he comes back to Twitter.
just symbolically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could we then
Tweets
link
his
it?
eyes
Could we
glow
then
or
link it
something.
to a webcam that is constantly streaming on the website? Is J Allard tweeting yet.com? And just when you go there and you see that the sheet is still over the painting, you know that he's not.
That's probably what it should be.
Anyway,
I think the subject is complete.
it's definitely more than complete.
Or is it the end? Question mark. Will J. Allard return?
It's up to you, readers. Tweet at J Allard. Anyway, do you guys want to take a break?
Yeah.
Sure.
I want to go tweet J. Allard real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Squarespace, the best, the fastest, and the easiest way to make your own beautiful and responsive website, online store, portfolio, or blog. You do not need to know how to code. It's incredibly straightforward. You can sign up without a credit card. I've done this. It's like the easiest trial to sign up for. You can start making your site immediately. And we've had a number of Idle Thumbs podcast readers who have written us in to tell us about the sites that they made with Squarespace using our code THUMBS to save 10%. And this week, I am sure I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but Marius Zercher, I'm sorry. He says, after a rough year framed by family issues, I finally started my company this summer. Through all of it, I've been listening to the podcast, and it always made me happy. So when I thought of making a website, of course, I thought about Squarespace and your offer code. Their site is 1520.eu. That's 1520 spelled out. They are basically an event planning and consultancy company aimed at sort of helping hospitality and event companies reach young people. And they're based in the Netherlands, but they seem to operate in Europe generally. So if you want to go check that out, they're at 1520.eu. It is a very pretty site. I'm looking at it on my phone as usual, and it works fine. And I can browse around it and go to their different pages in multiple languages and read all about their services. That was made with Squarespace, squarespace.com, and the promo code THUMBS for 10% off. This episode of Idle Thumbs is also brought to you by Casper Mattress. They make mattresses, you will be shocked to learn. And they're very comfy. I've slept on a Casper mattress. And if you go to casper.com/thumbs and use the promo code THUMBS, you will get $50 off any mattress purchase. Spaff, I heard through the grapevine, which was your mouth,
Is my mouth the great
that it is that you have a Casper mattress that you
do.
sleep on. I didn't know that until today.
There you go. I'm not in the habit of telling people about my mattress.
I mean, I suppose that's fair enough, but this is the perfect venue to do so.
Everyone will hear.
It comes in a tiny box, which is
And then
incredible.
explodes
and
out
then,
of
yeah,
it.
just like becomes a mattress.
Yep.
And it's super comfortable. I recommend it to you, Nick Breckon.
Yeah. I'm thinking about buying a Casper.
Well, you could get $50 off.
I'm probably going to do it. Probably this week, actually.
Hopefully that's not a conflict or anything. It's probably fine. Just go do it.
Nick, you will buy one, and it will be comfortable as fuck.
Oh.
Casper.com/thumbs, promo code thumbs, $50 off. An already cheap
It'll
mattress.
like unfurl out of a box.
That's what I want.
Plus, you get like
That's really why I'm buying it.
What I want is for everyone who hosts Idle Thumbs to eventually be sleeping on a Casper mattress, because we've got Vanneman on one, we've got
That's true.
Spaff on one.
That's true.
If we can get Nick on one, then it's just Chris and I left.
There you go.
If you don't like it after 100 days, you can give it back. They'll take it, which is pretty cool for an
cool.
online
Yeah.
mattress. Like even a mattress at that affordable is a pretty big buy. So it's cool that they will do that.
Yeah.
I bet few people do.
I suspect that as well. Casper.com/thumbs with the promo code thumbs for $50 off. Thanks, Casper.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Casper.
My grandpa used to call me Jasper.
Oh, you've got to get a Casper mattress to honor your grandfather.
No, I hated it. hated him.
I wish he would have called me Casper, like his comfortable mattress.
Right. I wish I had a 100-day trial on my grandfather.
Wow! Oh, no.
Your name is actually Jasper.
Jasper Breckon.
Yeah, it was legally changed.
By you to Nick.
Or illegally changed. I'm actually Jay Breckon.
Oh, man. Welcome to our Notable J's LinkedIn group. We can hang out with J.K. Rowling and J.J.
J.R.R.
Abrams
Tolkien.
and J.R.R. Tolkien. J. Peterman.
Jar Jar Binks.
Oh, man. Jay
Jay
Peterman.
Peterman, yeah.
Nice pull. Are we back?
We never left, Chris.
Oh. Let's
Talk about Jasper and stuff.
So I have been playing an iOS game called The Sequence. This game was recommended to me by...
Is this like a self-help, self-actualizing type situation?
Possibly.
Are
I
you
guess.
about to try and indoctrinate us?
Chris is the scientist.
I mean, I guess we'll find out as I play more of it. You can... I mean, I'm not going to know because I'll be indoctrinated, but you can observe my behavior and do it, let me know on a future podcast.
If the sequence has you.
Yeah. I mean, it was recommended to me by someone I don't know, so it's totally possible.
By a robed figure in the BART station.
Yeah. It was recommended to me by Idle Thumbs reader Andrew Cobb, who tweeted me, "Have you checked out the iOS game The Sequence? It's fantastic and seems right up your alley." And it was 99 cents, and so, a minute after he tweeted that at me, I just bought it.
Yeah, there's some atoms in your brain that have definitely been reorganized into a parasite at this point,
Yeah,
for sure.
That's true. I can't stop buying copies of this same game again and again. It's only 99 cents.
You buy them all within each other, and that is the sequence.
Yeah, it's just the in-game purchase is just the sequence.
The sequence 2,
Purchase
the sequence 3,
sequence.
the
Purchase
sequence 4.
the sequence. You have advanced the sequence. So what is the sequence, Chris, now that we've established what the sequence is?
The Sequence is a puzzle game for iOS. It might be for other mobile platforms as well, for all I know. The closest comparison for this game by far, at least that I've played recently, is SpaceChem, which actually just came up on the podcast in a couple episodes recently by way of talking about Infinifactory, which was the same developer as SpaceChem. SpaceChem was a 2D puzzle game in which you sort of create an assembly line loosely based on principles of like molecular bonding, essentially. This game is very similar in the sense that you have... Basically what happens in this game is you have to create sort of an assembly line Rube Goldberg kind of device that will move a little circle from a starting point to an ending point. And so you have to sort of put down machines that will push the little disc and rotate it around, and then other machines that will push and rotate the first machines that you put down, and you essentially have to just create a big interlocking sequence that will move just a continual flow of these little discs from the start point to the end point. It's like the Incredible Machine or something, but in sort of modern, very flat aesthetic, very stylish looking kind of thing. This game feels a little bit more accessible to me than SpaceChem. SpaceChem is a game that I really loved and played a lot of, but also past a point, it kind of feels like you have to be just a full-on genius to keep playing it. I mean, I'm sure there are people I probably know people who played all the way through the thing and, just really, it just all clicked with them perfectly. I definitely hit a wall, and I may very well hit a wall with this game as well. But so far, there's something about it that feels a little bit... there's a little bit more of the kind of Rube Goldberg feel and a little bit less of the kind of complexity of rules that I remember from SpaceChem. And a lot of what I find myself doing in this game, and SpaceChem has some of that as well, but a lot of what I find myself doing in the sequence is stuff like ensuring that the more efficient little pusher-puller rotating modules, the ones that sort of do their job faster, a lot of my time is spent slowing them down, like making them less efficient so that they don't sort of outrun the slower modules, so to speak, and then cause my little, widgets to get backed up, which then will cause your whole machine to fail. Like if you ever just like push a little module or a widget into a wall or into another module
you're
or
like,
anything, you will lose.
You're like covering for your inefficient workers. You're like a union.
Exactly. Yes. And it's
Greedy devs.
greedy devs, lazy devs.
Lazy devs.
I mean, much the opposite, actually, of greedy devs, lazy devs. This is a $1 game that is extremely well polished and well made. And
how many free updates have come out, I ask you?
I have no idea. But it was
lazy devs.
This kind of thing. I know that there's been a lot of talk recently on just throughout Twitter and on blogs and so on about the like so-called Indiepocalypse and whether there are too many games or what on Steam and on App Store and everywhere else. I don't really know the answer to any of those things. But it is.
But you do know that you did not know that the people who made Torchlight and Diablo had a new fully featured game coming out until it was already out.
And that some guy on Twitter just recommended me a 99-cent game that I never probably would have heard of at all. That is totally up my alley and extremely well polished. It's just crazy to me how many completely like full featured, ambitious, well made, well polished games
are failing because there are too many of them.
I mean, maybe. I have no idea. Maybe not. I don't know how the makers of the sequence are doing. I mean, I think iOS is probably a way more brutal environment than Steam still.
The makers of the sequence is hopefully the name of the sequel to the sequence. Shit.
Yeah. I mean, the level menu is basically a sort of a kind of abstracted version of a microchip or something where I'm connecting nodes that are then all sort of ultimately pointing in to a big central something that I don't know what it's going to be when I beat all the levels and all the little nodes light up. I don't. Maybe
this should have been the
maybe it's
principle
Frog Fractions
game,
too.
Where you just complete the AI that then just kicks off the game. Anyway.
I forgot that they did that.
Yeah,
they released the little
the
Talos Principle little game as a mobile game. Have you downloaded that? Have you played it?
Just a little bit. I mean, it's essentially the mini game that's within the actual game. But
the 5 seconds that you showed me of the sequence was incredibly compelling. That game looks very, very well done.
It's really slick.
Yeah,
it's just very, very just well made.
The rhythm of your successfully operating machine was also really hypnotic to watch. Like it has. Even though it's completely abstracted, simple, top-down sort of iOS-looking shapes, it has a fully working sequence machine. Even from like the 3 seconds that I saw, you can create the satisfaction of like assembly line GIFs where you watch the ice cream sandwich get made and it perfectly loops. Where this is like the disc comes down and the hand grabs it and spins around, and then like a couple lights change color, then another hand grabs that and puts it in the bin.
Yep.
And just watching that cycle seamlessly forever has the same satisfaction to me of watching like chain links get made or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Yep, that's exactly true. It's very sometimes you a level is pretty straightforward and you just kind of go through it, and then sometimes you at least very frequently I'll end up having to solve a level in sort of 3 stages, where the first stage is like, okay, just get one disc from point A to point B. I don't know what these things actually are. I'm just calling them discs. They're circles, but I don't know what they actually are. You get one from point A to point B, but then immediately everything starts backing up and like just collapsing because it's not sustainable. It's just, only the first one works right before it all falls apart. And then the second phase is like, okay, I'm just kind of trying things to try and make the wheels spin a little more cleanly. And I'm kind of succeeding, but there's like bugs to work out. And then the third phase is like, oh man, I see the thing that makes me use exactly every piece they gave me in a beautiful way, and it all comes together. And then the ones where you have to go through those 3 phases are the ones where it's very satisfying to, when you're watching your completed creation, more accurately, when it's being tested and you're watching the test of it happen, you can play at sort of normal speed, 2x or 3x, And usually I'll just put it on 3x because I don't want to wait for it to painstakingly go through this whole process. But when I've just gone through a big mental breakthrough and I'm like, oh, hell yes, this one was crazy, and I did it, I will leave it on the slow, stately 1x playback and
to
sort of
watch
relish
it unfold.
in the intricate machinery I have constructed.
You'll observe your sequence. You'll observe the sequence.
Exactly, yes. That is when I perceive the sequence. Which is what this game is also secretly teaching me to do.
Right. Yeah, when all the main menu stuff converges, your phone's just going to blink white for a second and some like supersonic audio will play. And then you'll
and then a dog will freak out.
A dog will freak out, and then you'll be a libertarian.
And then I'll be the Manchurian candidate, yeah.
You'll be the new Mr. Rogers.
What?
You will then reveal film B-roll of manufacturing happening.
Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, we'll watch a trombone assemble itself to the sound effects of trombones, and crayons will just come pouring out of everywhere.
Did you know that Mr. Rogers' actual name was Mr. Neighbor? His real name. So I thought, as a child,
do you want to be my neighbor?
Much to the protestations of
Neighbor.
my mother, who insisted his name was Fred Rogers. And I said, no, he's everyone's neighbor. His real name is Mr. Neighbor. His television nickname is Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah. I was also convinced that Mr. Rogers' show was live. And so when it cut from him being in his house to being in like the mountains, I was amazed.
Mr. Rogers very subtly used the magic of editing to confuse and delight the shit out of children. Just the stupid walking offset into the other set, and then the train comes in and maintains continuity.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe those were next to each other.
Yep.
Probably they just cut the camera.
That was a good show.
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
Oh,
that was
fantastic.
You had to watch the Wombles.
True. I may have won.
The Wombles of one?
The Wombles of Wimbledon Common. Do you not know of them?
I do know of them. I've seen them on YouTube.
They're amazing.
They're very English, very British. Which are they?
Very horrible.
English.
They are specifically English.
Yeah,
okay.
Probably.
You went to some kind of festival. You went to Indiecade.
Yes, I did.
You went to WombleCon.
Went to WombleCon in Wimbledon on Wimbledon Common. It was fantastic.
No, you went to Indiecade.
Went to Independent Cade. I did.
Indiecade, the independent arcade.
Yeah. I like Indiecade. Have you been to Indiecade?
I've never been to Indiecade.
I never have either, and I'm always told that I'm really missing out. And it's
Nick, have you been to Indiecade?
I haven't.
Okay, no one has gone to Indiecade.
It's a really fun
cool
festival. So it takes place in Culver City in Los Angeles in a parking lot in some tents, which is already completely different from any
Wait, really?
like convention or anything that you go to.
Really?
Yeah. Also, it's always 30 degrees or 90 degrees, depending on if you're American or not. So it's blazing hot, and all the tents are kind of sweaty. But they are filled with really interesting games, and some of them are games that will eventually become retail things. PlayStation's a really big sponsor of it, so they bring a lot of stuff down, and Nintendo are there as well, which is awesome considering the size of this thing. It's like pretty small. But the things that like really interest me there are the like show games, like the things that people make that you're probably not
installations.
Yeah, like installation pieces, or just incredibly weird stuff. Like this year, they had a VR thing where you had to put an entire elephant head on your head and then serve tea with your trunk.
And pretend you're in a TIE fighter.
And pretend you're in a TIE fighter and roll around in a bowl.
You had to serve tea
pretend
with
you
your
were
trunk.
Max Rebo.
Oh, because your trunk had some sort of motion sensing on it, so you had to use your real human hand to move your elephant trunk around. Yeah, good.
That kind of thing.
Did you play that telephone game?
I didn't play it, but I nearly played it.
Okay, what is that? I saw a picture of what looked so.
I will tell you.
I want to back up for half a second because there was a GDC game that we talked about. I think it was an episode that Tom Francis guested on, and it was a game that was basically a shorting out console of a ship, so you had to just be constantly plugging things in using patch cables and all sorts of stuff. This game gave the impression of that style of game where there were screens and hardware and stuff, but the only photo that I saw was of a person holding a telephone handset that was plugged into the system,
an old school,
like a payphone phone receiver.
Right.
I started to play this game. I really wanted to play it, but time didn't allow. But I started the process of doing so, which involves you talk to the guys and they hand you a clipboard and you have to fill out a little application form, and you fill out some stupid stuff and you hand it back, and then they comment on it and circle some things and then make you get in line. And eventually, unfortunately, I didn't get to do this, but they sit you down at your workstation, and your workstation is a big monitor and a computer for playing this game, but also this old telephone kiosk thing. And basically, they have built a game that they decided they want to make a game that would be impossible to play without a customer support phone line. So you are a kind of nuclear weapons control operator, or satellite weapons technology thing with all these fucking buttons and things, but you have no idea how it works. And so stuff starts happening, but the only way of finding out how to operate this stuff is to pick up the phone and dial the helpline, and then listen to the instructions, the robot on the end, and press 2 for operating this switch, press 3 for doing that, and it has hold music, and you can get lost in the things. So all the watching people play it, they're just the phone rested under their chin, typing it up a thing.
God, that's really good.
Pressing it, looking really lost. Good.
That's
I'm
amazing.
sad I didn't get to it.
Do you know what it was called?
It's called Operator.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Did play another game called Line Wobbler. Have you seen that?
Nope. Stop.
It's a 1D dungeon crawler game it takes place on a strip of LED lights that's several meters long and just goes straight up a big pole. And the controller is those kind of spring coiled door stop things that you put on the back of a door so that it, or the wall.
Yeah, the springs goes brrrr.
Yeah, one of those. That's the controller for it. So you can move it left and right to move an LED up and down this strip of lights, and that's your character. And you might encounter another dot of a different color, and if you wobble the thing and make it go bang, then that's how you attack it and kill it. Otherwise, it will kill you. And then there are other things you have to traverse, there's lava fields that are kind of darkened yellow, and then suddenly will go bright orange, which means they're active, and you have to kind of go past them when they're low. But you're basically trying to get all the way to the top, and then you'll get to the next level, and there'll be more enemies, and there's eventually a boss fight and stuff. There you go. Indiecade is filled with things like that, which is why it's fun.
Yeah, it's cool.
An interesting place.
Nice. Cool.
Reader
mail? Yeah.
Read it to me.
Oh, man, that was the new Reader Mail theme right there.
Read it to me.
Reader Mail.
So we have a couple Downwell emails that I wanted to read because I didn't talk anymore about Downwell this week, even though I've continued to play a lot of Downwell.
I've unlocked so many palettes, and you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Man, playing with the original Game Boy colored palette, it just feels like a different game. Everything feels so soft and tame and boring, except you're still being fucking wrecked.
Yep.
But you get lulled into a sense of of calmness because anyway, Downwell.
So Pierre-Yves Laflèche writes...
Wait, what?
Pierre
writes, "My name is Boss." Anyway, continuing.
Hello, Thumbs. Halfway through your discussion about Downwell, I went to pick it up on my iOS device. I played through it a couple times, and then on my third playthrough, I made it to the final boss. That was very fun and relaxing.
Excuse me?
I
What the
thought to
fuck?
myself.
What? Oh, okay, wait.
I put it away until that evening when I decided to check out if anyone was streaming it. And indeed, there were a couple people playing it on Twitch. I watched them play something that looked exactly like my version of Downwell, but was also very different.
Oh, man.
Turns out my old iPhone 4 runs Downwell at about 1/10 the normal speed. I think I'll stick with this version. Thanks for the cast, Pierre-Yves Laflèche, a Zen master. Oh, I guess from the forums.
That's so good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really good.
What an
Can you
enjoyable
imagine hearing
game.
the way that people have been talking about this game and then playing through and just hey, I got to the boss, pretty cool. Fun. Nice game. Anyway, done with that one.
Yeah.
That is like going, I've heard about this Super Hexagon game.
Yeah.
And then just a gear slowly. You're just,
It's kind of like a hedge maze.
it's like a maze exploration game.
All right. So T. Phineas Fish Esquire writes, "Hi,
Wow,
Thumbs."
the names today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This was actually an email that he originally wrote on the forums, and I thought he should send it in, so he did. He writes, I'm glad you guys talked about Downwell. I appreciated hearing the Spelunky fanatic angle. I never got into Spelunky, but I love Nuclear Throne, and this game feels a lot like that. Obviously from a visual standpoint, but also the way I gravitate towards specific weapons and perks, rather than feeling like I have to grasp everything. There's also some Luftrausers and the use of wacky 3-color schemes. Pastel and Vivid are particularly great, Grandma a close third. The combo stuff is really cool, but I'm not sure how I feel about how it's presented. I wonder how many people play a little bit and bounce off before they figure out the fun of chaining a bunch of bounces, or before they get to levitate, which really makes combos a lot easier to do. The levitate perk only changing the physics of your character without changing any other balance makes me wonder if high-level players would stop using it. World 3 does introduce a time-based mechanic, but I haven't gotten there enough to know if dropping faster would make that easier or tougher. As a weird aside, I play most of my 2D games on an arcade stick, as long as I can get the buttons to work out. It feels particularly great with Downwell because it uses 3 digital inputs. It also has a very arcade-style presentation with a very narrow vertical field of play, reminiscent of a lot of early arcade vertical shooters. I might try that vertical monitor trick if I can figure out how to do it later. A cool Super Metroid thing I noticed. Jake noticed the level design is similar to that of vertical Metroid rooms. That's probably a direct inspiration because this game literally has the Super Metroid wall jump mechanic. That is to say, if you jump with enough lateral momentum or bounce off an enemy, you'll spin as you jump, which lets you do a single wall jump. There's even a short wall jump pose if you move away from a wall you're touching, just like in Super Metroid. The way bounces let you refresh your wall jump must give the game a huge skill ceiling. Sorry for the long email. Thanks for all the well-casted pods. Miles.
Man, I did not notice that there was wall jumping in this.
You can only do the wall jump if you have full weapon charge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, full boot charge, I guess, most accurately.
Right.
And yeah, you can do it once because we just can.
Right, but anytime
you bounce,
recharge,
you'll recharge it. Yeah. I find myself doing it on accident more than anything else, to be honest, because in the game, I've become so obsessed with just upping my combo count, which I think now I've gotten up into the 70s,
so
that like I would never.
Does a wall jump reset you?
No, it's just risky because if you fuck it up, you'll fall to the ground. You know, like
right.
you'll just, you know what I mean? Like it's just
you got to get good at your wall jumps, Chris.
I know. I practice them in the side rooms sometimes because often there will be a little gem that's higher than you can jump normally. So I'll practice my wall jumps to get that gem. Yeah, I liked this email. I thought there were a lot of good observations. I do think that it's very likely that a lot of people have bounced off this game because the things that make it deep are definitely not obvious when you just play it without any priming. And that was the case for me until I read Doug Wilson's opinion piece about it when he sort of listed off some of the important properties of the game and its systems. And also, there's one other thing that he said in this email that I wanted to mention. Yes, I really like the Nuclear Throne comparison. That game, in terms of just the core loop, that is probably actually a more appropriate comparison than Spelunky is, because Nuclear Throne is another game where it is just constant pandemonium. Spelunky has like huge bursts of pandemonium, but also a lot of sitting around and planning. And you can play Downwell like that, but is not what the game encourages or rewards. The game encourages and rewards a more Nuclear Throne-like experience.
Almost like manic flow state, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly a great way to put it. And constantly grabbing gems and power-ups, and they're just sort of all flowing into you as you're just going fucking bananas.
We didn't talk about Nuclear Throne that much. I think we had one episode where you had played it, Chris, and I played
that game for a few weeks. It didn't grab me.
Have you come back to it? Because it's been like evolving hell for the last year, right?
No, I haven't. I know that game has been under just constant sort of ongoing development, which is really cool.
It seems like it's settled down lately. Is that correct?
It would have to be the case, right? Yeah. I'll check it out again. I liked what I played of it. It didn't grab me in the way that either Spelunky or Downwell have, but I mean doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it's a cool game, as is this. Oh, and Jake, actually I have a question for you. Have you ended up settling on any color scheme that isn't the standard one?
No, I kind of noodle around. I play with the most recent one that I get for a couple rounds, then go back to the high contrast default one because I think it's the most easy to see.
I
played with blue, orange, and white for a while just because I liked the insanity of that color scheme. But Yeah. Do you have a preferred?
I play with Vivid most of the time.
I don't know if I have that
which
one
is
yet.
just kind of like a more like garish version of the original, I suppose. Just because not for any particular reason other than I just wanted to see if I could get myself acclimated to one that wasn't the normal one, and that was the one that didn't repel me.
Yeah, I don't think I have it yet.
And then when I still occasionally play on iOS, maybe like once every few days. I don't have a high tolerance for it because I just find it so much more awkward than playing with a controller. But like every once in a while, I'll play it on my phone, and on my phone I use the matcha sort of green. It's like the default.
Both green.
With
yeah. Oh, someone pointed out on the forums that if you do play this game on iOS, and if you're a hardcore iOS human being who actually has a Bluetooth gamepad, Downwell actually does let you pair a proper gamepad with that, so you can get any experience you could ever want with your
vertical
iPad
monitor,
Pro
horizontal monitor, phone touchscreen, phone controller, whatever. iPad,
Courier prototype.
Two of them running at the same time on your Courier screens, like those crazy Japanese videos of people playing double Dance Dance Revolution, like playing 2-player Dance Dance Revolution on their own.
Yeah.
Or like crazy Tetrises where they're doing two of them at the same time, and
Crazy Tetrises.
That's the official competition. Crazy Tetrises. Who will be crowned the Crazy Tetris boss? 2013.
You will.
Mm-hmm. I wish.
Chris tried, believe me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Speaking of Spelunky, Andy Hall writes, "Hey guys, Andy Hall here, programmer of Spelunky. I'll probably regret telling you this, but in my spare time sometimes I like to make silly songs. As it happens, the name of one of my songs from a few years ago is Dr. Daddy Longlegs. Since it seemed like you guys were on the hunt for the perfect Daddy Longlegs song, I figured I'd pass it along. It's pretty bad. Enjoy."
Oh, we're in Daddy Longlegs territory.
Yep.
Well, he's got 8 arms to move and bend. He's got 8 hands that he can lend. He's got 8 arms to hug and love. He's got 8 hands to wear a glove. The web he weaves is not of lies, but of beads to live our lives by.
That's the most pleasing part.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can call me crazy, but he's the doctor. The doctor, Daddy Longlegs.
So there you go.
Yeah, he's the doctor of love.
That is Andy Hall,
Wow,
programmer
that was amazing.
of the incredible game Spelunky with Dr. Daddy Longlegs.
Yeah, I know people have been saying that maybe Downwell is like challenging the Spelunky throne, but I think we've now ruled definitively that Spelunky
Beats all.
beats all just by virtue of having a Daddy Longlegs song associated with it.
Yep. True. Jordan Pugh writes, also, thanks for writing in, Andy. Your game's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You made like the game that I've played more than anything else in my adult life, probably. Jordan Pugh writes, "Hello again, Thumbs. I have a few questions."
Have you played more Spelunky than guitar in your adult life?
Oh, God. I don't want to have to figure that out, 'cause my answer might be yes. That's terrible.
Sorry, hearing Dr. Daddy Longlegs made me think about that comparison.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Jordan Pugh writes, "Hello again, Thumbs. I have a few questions. One, how does your mail system work? If I ask a question and it is not read on the podcast that week, can I assume it was rejected? If not, is it frowned upon to resubmit questions to make sure they don't get buried if I really want them answered?" I'll just answer these questions in order, I suppose. That is, no, we very, very, very frequently, the way it works, I guess I'll just explain how it works. So the way it works is we have a folder that all email goes into when you send it to questions@idlethumbs.net. Send in your mail today. And from there, I can put it in a number of other folders, the most important one of which is the to read folder. And that is the folder that I browse through, usually during the break on the podcast, and find emails to read. And often I will pull emails back from, like, in some cases, months earlier. I've gone several months back before. I will usually pick emails based on just the composition of who's on the podcast a given week, the things we've talked about on the show, any number of other factors that just seem relevant. So that means if you don't hear your email the week you sent it in, that doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to read it. In fact, it's probably relatively rare to read emails the same week they're sent unless they're about something specifically topical that I want to keep current.
For instance, if you were the programmer of Spelunky and wrote a song called
Yes.
Dr. Daddy Longlegs, it's probably going to show up.
Yeah, that goes in the folder called Daddy Longlegs.
Right.
Also, we have a folder for Daddy Longlegs songs.
Finally, I mean, we set it up in 2008 when we started this podcast, and man,
We had to talk about that Daddy Longlegs song a few weeks ago to finally bring him in.
Yeah. So anyway, you can send them back again if you want. I would probably prefer you not, honestly, because I do look at all the emails that come in, and there are times where we just get there are times where we don't get as much email, and then there are times where we get more than we can actually read. So I end up spreading them across a number of episodes. And then sometimes people ask things that we just wouldn't be comfortable answering, so I just can't read them. Anyway, number 2, I decided to work through the catalog of podcasts from the beginning, so I have some questions to some old stuff. For games
when will Nick come back to the show?
For games with established source material like Dante's Inferno, how much is a video game allowed to deviate for the sake of making a good game? For example, if a survival horror game were made about Anne Frank, then an attic would make a fairly subpar setting. Could the designer make alterations, such as allowing the player to wander the entirety of a large house avoiding SS officers? On another note, an Oculus Rift tour of a real Dante's Inferno setting would be really cool.
J. Allard.
I mean, I guess you could do that. I don't know why it would be...
Someone please make that game.
I don't know why that wouldn't be a different story. Like, it wouldn't really have to be an Anne Frank game at that point, right?
I mean, it sounds like most games at this point, hiding from SS officers in a building.
Yeah.
It's just that you're a little girl.
I mean, you could just make that game, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Just
if
skins
the EA presents Division were still around that had made Dante's Inferno and they were to adapt Anne
As well
Frank,
as the great Gatling Gunsby.
yeah, one, they should go out of business well before they get near adapting Anne Frank. They did, I guess. I mean, I guess they didn't. They made Dead Space instead. They the ultimate literary adaptation.
It's a dark retelling, the Anne Frank saga.
Well, I mean, Dead Space was loosely based on Anne Frank.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, I guess the answer to this reader's question is you can go pretty fucking far. Number 3.
That's... Yeah.
Is that why you keep finding journals in those games? Just like Anne Frank's.
That's also why you wear a
pages.
spacesuit and remove limbs from aliens.
Yeah, that's Anne Frank.
Classic.
Yeah.
So Anne.
So Anne. That's so Anne.
So Anne.
Dead Space. It's the same game. They just branded it. That's so Anne.
It's why that
For the German
Do
market.
you remember that episode when Steve Gaynor was obsessed with the Necroflyer, that weird like beast in one of the Dead Space like spin-off games that had that horrible toupee? That was Adolf Hitler's hair.
Gross.
Jesus.
Look it up.
Look up Necroflyer.
Look up
image
Necroflyer on the
search.
Dead Space
I wonder if you
Wikia.
actually find, yeah, probably the Dead Space Wiki is what you want.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about his next question. This is my old question that I am resubmitting. Sorry. I was wondering if you'd noticed horror games diverging into distinct groups as of late. With earlier games like Resident Evil 1, you had a very unsettling atmosphere coupled with limited defensibility. This seemed to have changed around Resident Evil 4, where the atmosphere of solitude and fear remained, with scenes such as the dog maze, but you became a zombie whale-killing badass. Now, more currently, horror games seem to have split the style of game into two distinct ones. On the one hand, you have a very creepy atmosphere where your only defense is to run away from whatever chases you. On the other hand, you have games like Left 4 Dead 2 where you become the angel of re-death to any zombie unfortunate enough to cross your path. Left 4 Dead 2 is certainly the extreme. Most horror shooters still are situated somewhere between it and Resident Evil 4. Stalker is one series off the top of my head that is closer to a creepy shooter, but again, you're still practically a super soldier. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing being made currently that gives the limited defense experience of early Resident Evils. This is just my personal view, but honestly, I'm fairly young and I do not have a very deep knowledge of horror games. I don't play the really scary ones, and to be honest, I've only played the 4th Resident Evil, though I plan on playing the first soon. The majority of my knowledge is secondhand info I've absorbed from conversations online about these other games. I was wondering if you guys see this, or if it's a matter of me not being aware enough of how the genre has progressed. What do you think about this? Is it worth losing the middle ground in exchange for distilled horror experiences, as well as more lighthearted zombie shooting galleries? That's an interesting observation. I mean, definitely the sort of high atmosphere version has gone to games like Soma and Amnesia, where you're or like
PT.
Yeah, PT.
yeah, or
Like going so. I mean that PT and it seems like they're like the most extreme of this is games that just have effectively no combat, let alone
that's what I'm
limited
talking
defense.
about. None of these. I mean, most
Five
of these
Nights at
games have
Freddy
very little
and
combat.
et cetera, yeah.
Yeah, where you're
Gone Home, that ghost game.
That's true. Yeah, notable horror.
Or
game
what was
Gone
that
Home.
game that came out a couple years ago where you just had a camcorder in an old spooky house full of ridiculous enemies? Man, what was the name of that game? Whatever. Squeeze through gaps.
Oh, with all the crazy beefers.
Yeah, so all about it's camcorders and beefers all around.
Yeah, I can't remember. And then there was also the game on the island where you have to sort of synthesize medicine.
What? Miasmata?
Miasmata.
Yeah.
No, I was actually thinking of that game while you were reading that.
Yeah.
Maybe not super applicable considering there's only one enemy in that game.
Yeah, I think.
But it's a pretty terrifying game.
It seems like the specific
It is,
Resident
but
Evil
when-
1 style, which I
think-
guess maybe you could carry out to Silent Hill a tiny.
Well, I was
bit.
going to say,
think
for me,
Silent Hill's totally in that
for me, the
category.
original Silent Hill is actually, well, I guess Silent Hill 2 by extension feels like the apex of what he's describing.
There's survival horror. That's that specific genre of horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
But it's just you're so inept in those games.
no,
Right, but that's what he's talking about, right? It's
No,
like
I know.
you can defend yourself. It's just really, really hard.
Right, but I mean,
instead of
even-
literally not being able to defend yourself or being a machine.
The closest version
Yeah.
of that, really, I guess, that we're in is stuff like The Forest or something, right? Like,
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
the survival horror modern close version of that is kind of the like
It's not. This isn't a horror game, but like
the re-roll generative world, craft a bunch of stuff, and you're never going to be powerful enough.
Yeah.
But there's enough systems there that you
interesting
can
point.
do it, but you can do it you can do it through making
Yeah.
a club that eventually degrades and
I
disappears
mean, I was
or whatever.
right.
Yeah, this isn't a horror game, but like Don't Starve, I feel like is kind of in
Yeah.
that middle ground where your objective is not to kill all
Right, where
the
the
things,
world-
but you can sort of like
Where you are
exploit some
effectively
mechanics
powerless,
too.
but if you can just scrape by enough with the sort
Yeah.
of emergent systems that the world gives you, you can do
Mm-hmm.
it. But that's very different than I'm sure like the way that bullets and health is metered out in Resident Evil is by design to let you barely be scraping by all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
Like-
Alien Isolation might be a halfway example of this in some ways. In other ways, I mean, it's you're shooting a bunch of androids, but I feel like there are parts of that game that hit on that.
parts of The Last of Us is quite survival horror-esque. There's like
Oh, yeah.
very limited resources and very specific choices made when trying to confront enemies.
Yeah,
But
That's
then
true,
you also get
although-
into combat with guns
Yeah.
and stuff, which is
Yeah.
different. But
Yeah, that game. I rarely. Yeah, that game definitely wasn't sort of a horror game in the way that I think of a Resident Evil or Silent Hill game being, where I'm just like scared all the time, or at least feel like I'm supposed to be scared all the time.
and yet they do put you in a darkened room that
Yeah,
is
they're-
all
but they're
run
like-
with
Yeah.
clicker.
But that's like
deep
here's
monsters
this
and-
here's like a moment, here's like
Yeah.
a section that's like a little pocket of a survival horror feel. You
Is
know what I mean?
Outlast the name of the game full of camcorders and beefy
You
guys?
might be right.
yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds familiar.
So there's like Resident Evil and Silent Hill and stuff were all come from like Japanese
Yeah.
survival horror stuff, and I wonder if there still are lots of survival
I mean,
horror
there was
stuff,
Alone.
things
There
that
was
we just
Alone in the
don't know
Dark.
about them.
Alone in the Dark
Yeah,
is the
and,
original survival
yeah,
horror, right?
Yeah,
I mean, Alone in the Dark is a fixed camera.
that was European.
Yeah, but it's like it's pre-rendered camera angles, and we've talked about this before. The fact that Alone in the Dark even has like you walk past a window, and the window breaks, and then later a dog jumps through
Right.
it. Like
Yeah,
it has
yeah.
everything you could ever want.
Yep.
Until Dawn is taking up that mantle now.
Mm.
I hark back to 90s FMV
Right,
horror
right,
stuff
right.
like Seventh Guest
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be curious if to hear any sort of games we're missing if readers write into questions@idlethumbs.net with obvious things we've missed or maybe not
Right, obvious things that harken back to being a survival horror thing, but are not 100% designed to be a spiritual successor to Resident Evil or whatever. Because that feels like where we're coming around to to reclaiming Resident Evil and Silent Hill mechanics. Not Silent Hill. No one's gonna there's gonna be the way that there's like cockpit redux games now that are like clearly you're aiming to be the combat of Wing Commander 2 or
Right,
those stuff
right.
type.
Yeah.
Of, I imagine someone is working on
Someone's
pumping out
prepping that Kickstarter.
that Silent Hill spiritual successor
Yeah, probably.
Not Silent Hill. Did I say Silent Hill?
You did.
Resident
God,
Evil.
Silent
You did,
Hill
but
would
Resident
be
Evil's
so much
what you
harder to do than Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and they were going to do it and didn't.
Silent Hills.
PT, yeah.
Oh, PT's that's nothing like Silent Hill though. PT's so different than Silent
Yeah.
Hill.
I mean, The Evil Within was the Resident Evil creators game, and it definitely skewed more towards Resident Evil 4 than any of the early ones.
Yeah. Oh, Spaff, you never talked about Life is Strange, but maybe we can talk about it in the future.
Sure, we can time travel to next week and then blah blah.
That's a joke about the game Life is Strange.
Yeah, we can talk about that next week.
Cool. All right. Well, maybe that's it this week.
Maybe it is.
Let's
Perhaps.
go home.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. If you have any email that you would like to send us that may or may not get read next week,
Might go in the Daddy Longlegs folder.
Might-
if you're lucky.
send it to questions@idlethumbs.net. Also, if you like this podcast, please consider telling a friend. Recommending us to other people who you think might be into our show is pretty much the best way we have of spreading the word. And if you do appreciate us and think that we're doing something worthwhile, consider rating us on iTunes as well. That is probably the second best way we have to try and get the word out organically. We have a number of other shows at idlethumbs.net about topics similar to what we do, but also very different, such as 3 Moves Ahead, which is the premier strategy gaming podcast on the internet. It is hosted by Rob Zachney, was co-founded by Troy Goodfellow, and they have a rotating cast of strategy game experts, and they just launched a Patreon to help support their show, which they've been running for years and years for free. And if you go to patreon.com/3MA, you can pledge however much you want to help 3MA stay on the air and maybe put a few bucks in their pockets to help out with all of the time and effort that they put into the show. They have a couple stretch goals up there, such as an exclusive, or not exclusive, but a sort of bonus Paradox-focused monthly podcast that they would do, which I know a lot of their listeners have demanded because Paradox games are very attractive to the strategy gaming crew. And their even crazier stretch goal is a history book club. Anyway, you go to patreon.com/3MA if you like 3 Moves Ahead and would like to support their show. All the rest of our shows can be found at idlethumbs.net, including this one and that one.
And the other one.
And the other ones. Thanks for listening.
The other
Bye.
one. The other one is Terminal 7.
That's true. Did he, when he visited, did he spring out of a small box?
Unfurl.
He would have actually. I mean, that's actually when he would call me Jasper. He was always doing things like that.
Unfurling.
Like, hey, Jasper! Scare the shit out of me.